So hello everybody and welcome to the traditional Education USA seminar on Thursday. Today we're pleased to be able to talk about financing your education in the United States. This is a rather large topic and often seen as an obstacle for studies in America, but thanks to our fantastic guest speaker today, we're going to be able to look at all the different ways how we can cut the cost of attendance at American college. So I'm welcoming Celeste Giordani. I hope I got that right.
Yes, you did.
Thank you. So Celeste is joining us from Boise State University, where she serves as the International Enrollment Counselor. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you all for spending your Thursday evening with me. I know you all have probably a lot of plans on your Thursday evening, so I'm excited that you chose to either join in the webinar or go to the center to hear me present. A little bit about myself. My name is Celeste Giordani. Liz got the name right. I work in international admissions at Boise State University. So for those of you who don't know, Boise State University is a mid-sized public institution in the Northwest United States. We're just about an hour flight from San Francisco or Seattle in the state of Idaho. So I won't be talking too much about Boise State today because the focus is on you and how you should be able to finance your U.S. education. But just know that I've worked in this role for 2 years, so I'm really a great resource for you in regards to not only financing your studies, but also the application process for U.S. universities, maybe the immigration process as well. I also have that role at the university, and then pretty much any questions you may have related to higher education in the United States. So we will hold off on questions until the end. We'll do a presentation and then we'll have a Q&A session. For those of you all who are attending, feel free to chat questions. And then if you're at the center, I believe Liz will turn on the microphone. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. If there's any point throughout the presentation where you either can't see or can't hear me, there's technical difficulties, send me a chat, or maybe Liz can say it at the center, and then we will get that figured out for the rest of the presentation. Once again, thank you so much for attending this today, and I'm very excited to help guide you through your journey to U.S. higher education. All right, hold on just one moment. Okay, did it share the screen?
Yes, we can see your presentation. Thank you.
You can, perfect, okay. So that is my beautiful face. It was before I got a haircut, and that is the background of the university at Boise State. So starting right off into a little bit about, sorry, hold on just one moment. Okay, perfect. All right, so the first thing that I do want to talk about is education as an investment. So obviously, U.S. higher education does have a high sticker cost, a high net cost. So it's really important to frame it in regards to how it's going to help your future. So U.S. education is appreciated globally. What this means is that it's worth a lot throughout the world, not just the United States. So you can take your U.S. higher education and really bring it back, no matter if that's to your home country or if that's to another country or if that's staying in the United States for a little bit. And it's going to be worth quite a bit, that degree. Like I said before, so that degree is really going to have that high rate of appreciation and employability. Those graphs, I know it might be hard to see, but essentially what those graphs mean is that the higher the degree you get, the more likely you are to be employed. And then in that job, the more likely you are to earn more. So a good example is that you could have maybe a bachelor's degree and you're doing one job, but if you have a master's degree and you're doing the same job, it's going to be worth more and you're going to make more money most likely, depending on the job, of course, but typically, at least in the United States, that's what we see. As you can see on that left-hand slide, you can see that your lifetime earnings increase greatly by the amount of education you have. So whether that is, less than your high school diploma or your high school diploma versus how much you're going to earn when you have a bachelor's degree, it's quite a significant difference. So it's something that you should be thinking about when you're thinking about maybe like, oh, do I want to further my education? You should really, frame it in the fact that you're going to earn a lot more over your lifetime, not just in your, weekly earnings. It's going to be truly over your full life. And then education as an investment, continuing to talk about that, why I frame education as an investment, not only to prospective students that I'm talking to, but also in my own life. It's because beyond the money portion, when you get a degree, you become a well-rounded professional, but also a well-rounded citizen. And that's why education is so important. So it's not just what you're doing, inside the classroom with your major courses and your general education. It's also what you're doing outside the classroom that's really going to be worth a lot. So those co-curricular activities, internships, everything that you're doing throughout your university experience, whether that's at the bachelor's level or the master's level, everything that you're doing outside the classroom is going to make you be more employable and also be a better citizen throughout your life. And then education as your investment. So this is a really important thing to think about when you're thinking of, do you want to pursue a bachelor's or a master's degree in the United States? Is this university going to help you stand out from the crowd throughout the rest of your life? So you want to really look at the coursework that goes into it, the experience that goes into that university, your involvement opportunities that you could have, and then the skills that you'll earn. Like I said, so it's important to understand what's going to make you stand out from the crowd, and is spending money on a bachelor's or master's worth it? Typically it's going to be, but once again, it truly just depends on the student and if you're putting the work in to make you stand out from the crowd. So the next couple of slides I'm going to go over, it's going to talk about the key terms that you should be thinking about when thinking about how to finance your U.S. U.S. education. There's a lot of complex vocabulary in the admissions and financial aid process. So before thinking about, where you want to study or what you want to study or, financing your education, it's important to know these key terms. So wait, what does that mean? These are some terms even I struggled with in high school. Like I said, it's a very complex process. So the more you know about it, the more prepared that you're going to be in regards to, creating a financial package for yourself at university. So cost of attendance. What cost of attendance is truly the cost it takes to attend a university. So I think there's sometimes confusion between the tuition versus the cost of attendance. The tuition, on one hand, is just going to be what you're paying for actual courses, whereas the cost of attendance is going to be those the cost for the actual courses, your fees, potentially your room and board and transportation, personal expenses, all of those things are going to wrap into your cost of attendance. Where that difference is important is when you're applying for your student visa. So you see at that bottom of the page right there, I put I-20 cost and immigration regulations. So typically your I-20 cost is going to be the cost of attendance, not just the tuition. So for example, Boise State, we have tuition of $24,000 without any scholarships, but our total cost of attendance, so the total I-20 cost, is $39,000. So it's typically quite a big difference. So it's important to understand that difference when you are looking at U.S. universities. The I-20 cost is important in regards to immigration regulations. Each university every year has to really carefully review what our cost of attendance is and what our I-20 cost is in order for us to stay in compliance with U.S. immigration policies. So going back up to tuition, you'll see there's a couple different types of tuition at U.S. universities. So in-state tuition or resident tuition, that is what we refer to when students are going to a public university that's in their state. So I was raised in California. If I happen to go to a California university, I didn't, I went to Boise State, but if I did go to a California university, I would have paid in-state tuition or resident tuition. It's typically significantly lower than out-of-state or non-resident tuition, just because at public universities, they're funded by the state, and so they're funded by taxpayers in the state, and so they want to provide it at a lower cost. Out-of-state tuition or non-resident tuition is something that you'll be paying, and a lot of times international students will fall into this category. Out-of-state tuition is something that you'll be paying if you're going to the university that's in a different state than you. So for me, I had to pay, well, if I hadn't have gotten scholarships, I would have paid the full out-of-state tuition cost at Boise State. Typically, it's a very big difference. So at Boise State in particular, it's $7,000 for your in-state tuition per semester, and then out-of-state tuition is going to be, $24,000. So it's quite a big difference in regards to what you'll be paying. Keep in mind, this doesn't include any scholarships. Some universities, whether they're public or private, will also have an international student tuition. International student tuition will typically be higher than that out-of-state non-resident tuition, and will include additional fees potentially that international students specifically will have to pay. When you are researching U.S. universities, it's really important to note and ask the admission staff, okay, if I get in, what will I be paying? Will I qualify for an in-state tuition, waiver perhaps, or will I be paying out-of-state tuition? Or are there additional fees that international students have to pay? All of these things are great questions for you to ask admission staff, and they're totally used to it, and they're more than willing to help and help you figure out what the actual cost is that you'll need to pay. That middle point right there, sticker price versus net cost. So the sticker price is typically what you'll see on the website. Typically it is the cost of attendance or the price without any scholarships. A lot of U.S. universities are able to offer scholarships and financial aid to international students. So take that sticker price typically with, in America, we call it a grain of salt, meaning that you can care about that sticker price, but there's a lot of other factors that go into it. So don't let that cost that's on the website really, scare you, because there are a lot of ways to finance your education at many schools in the U.S. So don't let that scare you away. And then so sticker price versus net cost. So that net cost is what you'll actually be paying at a university. So it's all those things. So where are you living on campus, or are you living off campus? Those prices are going to be quite different. How many courses do you take? Maybe your university charges per credit versus charges like just as a full-time student. So there's a lot of things that are going to affect your net cost. And also just how much are you spending at the university? And we'll go over all of those costs in a future slide, but just keep in mind those are some things that you should be looking at, and when you're looking at a university's website, and those terms that are very important. So moving on, continuing with vocabulary. So a lot of times when you are looking at a university's website, you will see tuition and fees rather than just tuition or just fees. So it's important to note that a lot of times they're together. What fees are their additional, essentially fees, monetary value that gets added on to your tuition and total cost in regards to, educational instruction. So essentially if a class maybe needs a fee to help run it, or if a professor needs a fee to help run the class, that's where those fees will come in. Facilities, so essentially sometimes you'll be charged a facilities fee. So whether that is using the rec center or using the student union building, using the computers on campus, all of those are going to be fees that are in your tuition fees. Or lab equipment. So this will be more important to understand if you are in a STEM major. So anything maybe in chemistry or biology, typically you'll be charged lab equipment fees throughout your 4 years, depending on how many lab courses you take. And then library. So most students on the campus will be charged library fees because, you know, they need to keep the library going. You know, like Boise State, we have over 1 million books in our library, and you can check out 100 at a time. So you sometimes do have to, you know, pay a small fee to help keep that going at the university. Living cost. So living cost is also something that goes into your cost of attendance. So it's something that's completely separate from your tuition. Keep that in mind. Your living cost is going to be added on to that tuition, and it's going to change. So your living cost will change whether you're living in a residence hall on campus or if you're living, you know, outside of the university at an apartment or a house. It's important when you are choosing US University to ask, how expensive is it to live near campus? So you know not only how much it's going to cost to live on campus, you know, your first year, but then after that, how much is it going to cost you? So those are just some important questions to ask. So living costs, once again, it's the cost of your room and board. So, you know, where you're sleeping every night, and then where you're also getting food. So whether that is cafeterias on campus or you know, food places throughout the city, those are all going to be factors that play into that. Books and supplies will also go into living costs. So, you know, what books do you need throughout your US education? Depending on your major, your books are going to vary a lot in price. So myself, I studied anthropology, cultural anthropology. So my books were very inexpensive relative to what my friends were paying. In accounting majors or in chemistry majors, their books were a lot more expensive because they were true textbooks, whereas maybe someone in the liberal arts field will typically not have textbooks. So they'll have more theoretical readings, novels that they'll have to read, things like that. And then transportation. Transportation is also something that goes into living cost. So when you're choosing a US university, it's important to know what kind of transportation options are there. And that typically plays into where the location is and what the setting is at the university. So if you're going to, you know, a very urban university, there's most likely going to be more public transportation options. So you can ride the bus, or you can easily maybe ride the subway. Let's say you're living in New York City, or ride the BART if you're living in San Francisco or the Bay Area. There's going to be a lot of public transportation options for you. In comparison, if you're living in a rural area, the transportation options will be probably, and not all US rural areas are like this, but most likely there won't be public transportation. And the difference is you'll most likely have to bike everywhere, or maybe Uber or Lyft some places to the airport. And there's going to be maybe not the best bus system. So you'll have to understand how your transportation is going to look throughout your 4 years and see what the price is for that. Boise, for example, is kind of in that sweet spot in the middle. So we do have public transportation that students can use because we are located in the capital city of our state, but we're also suburban enough to where there's bike trails everywhere. I ride my bike to work every day. And you can walk places. It's a very safe city, and you can get around pretty easily because everything's close. Another thing with transportation you need to think about is the university all like on one, you know, campus, or is it spread out throughout the city? That is something that you should know before you get to campus for orientation. The next cost is medical insurance. So some universities will provide medical insurance for international students, and you can't waive it. So that's how Boise State is. And then some universities will have you get your own insurance. Either way, you are required to have insurance as a student living in the United States. And that cost can be anywhere from $600 a semester to, you know, $2,000 a semester, depending on the insurance that you have, and that's offered by your university. And then personal expenses. So typically personal expenses are exactly what they sound like, but how it works is the university will determine personal expenses for the I-20 cost, but you most likely won't spend that much, or you might spend more. So it just depends on what kind of student you are, you know, how you're like, Are you eating out a lot? You know, things like that goes into how much personal expenses that you will spend throughout your 4 years. For example, I've included the Boise State University's cost of tuition and cost of attendance. So as you can see, so keep this in mind, it doesn't include any scholarships. So this would be a good example of our sticker price. Undergraduate, we're around $24,000, and then our room and board is around $10,600 for our highest residence hall on campus. So another thing to think about with that sticker price is that it typically, you know, shows the highest cost of living on campus, and a lot of times you can find less expensive, you know, places to live off campus, depending on the city, which I'll talk about in the next slide. And then books, so that is an estimation. You'll spend around $1,200 for books throughout a year. For me, I spent like $100. So it truly just depends on what your major is, what you're studying, and what your professors require. And also keep in mind, a lot of times you can find a way for your professors to provide the book, either the books for free or rent them from the library, get a loan from the library, and other ways to make that more affordable. Our health insurance happens to be around $1,400. And then our personal expenses, what we estimate is around $2,196. So you'll see that transportation is not listed on here. Boise State happens to just put that transportation with the personal expenses all in one. On our campus, it's really easy to get around without paying a lot, and so that's why we don't have a separate cost line for transportation. You can see graduate on the other side is going to be a little bit more expensive in regards to tuition and fees, and that's similar to most universities in the United States. Moving forward, so comparing cost of living. This is something that you should think about doing before you go to a U.S. university. Also, maybe when you're thinking about what region of the U.S. you want to go to university in, because every region is going to be different in expenses, and then along with every state and every city is going to be different. So a quick comparison of cost. So Idaho is in that northwest corner of the United States, so it's in orange. I have compared the monthly rent, the fuel per gallon, what does a dozen eggs cost, and then also what does a movie ticket cost to some other places in the US. So Seattle, San Francisco, Manhattan, Kansas, not Manhattan, New York, and then New York, New York. So you can see just by looking at that orange table that it's quite different in what you'll be paying depending on where you live. So comparison, you know, for a 2-bedroom apartment in Boise, you could pay $942. And then if you go to San Francisco or New York, you're going to be paying upwards of $3,000 for that. So you really need to think about what does your living costs look like once you're off campus, because that's where you're going to spend the majority of your time. And if you want to make it more affordable, you might think about living off campus as a first-year student. And it's not going to be more affordable if you're living maybe in a more urban and you know, a bigger city rather than if you're living in a suburban city. You can see that cost of living even goes down to what does a dozen eggs cost, or even what does a movie ticket cost. So you can get a movie ticket for $10 in Boise versus $16 in New York. So even on a day-to-day basis, your costs are going to be very different. This isn't saying that you can't make living in, you know, New York or San Francisco or Seattle affordable, because you can. It's just going to be a little bit more difficult, and you'll have to budget differently. For me, when I was choosing a university, this was a big, you know, thing for me to take into account, because, you know, Boise, I realized, okay, I could go to Boise. Not only is my, you know, I got a great scholarship, but also on a day-to-day basis, I wouldn't have to worry so much about what, you know, I was spending, because things were a little bit less expensive. So I could, you know, do the things I wanted to do, whether that was maybe go see a movie, go see a concert, you know, and do all these additional things, because I wasn't paying this, you know, exorbitant amount for, you know, a room to live in, and I could do other things. Cost of living in the United States is going to vary greatly, and it might be confusing. So I encourage you, if you have questions, ask the admissions staff at the university, and also the Education USA Center can also help you out as well. All right, so going into financing your studies and talking about how to strategize your application. Before you think about how to finance your studies, you should be thinking about what university is going to be able to offer you the best fit, and then figure out how to finance it that way. Obviously, this can be different in regards to undergraduate and graduate studies, because typically for graduate studies, you'll think about, you know, who's offering you money first, rather than picking a university on the basis of like location and program accreditation. So it's going to be a bit different, but here are some things that I like students to think about when they're choosing a university before that cost. So types of institutions, public versus private. A public university is something that is government funded. This typically means it'll be a lower cost, but they'll also be able to typically provide less scholarships. So Boise State, we are a public institution, so our tuition and fees are going to be significantly lower than private institutions, but we aren't able to, at the undergraduate level, provide full scholarships. Private universities, on the other hand, they're not government funded, but they are, and so they are quite a bit more expensive. But a lot of times private institutions, especially smaller private institutions and maybe less competitive, are able to offer better scholarships for international students. I'm not saying that you can't find an affordable option at the private university level, or you can't find full scholarships at the public university level, but that is typically what we'll see. So the other type of institution is a community college. So community college is a 2-year institution that offers associate's degrees. If cost is something that is pretty important to you and you don't think that you could afford a 4-year public university right now, I completely recommend starting off at a community college. Whether that, you know, Seattle, Washington has a great community of community colleges, or, you know, Houston, Texas does. There's a big spot in Arizona that also has community colleges, and then all throughout the East Coast as well, you'll find community colleges. These are a great option because it's a lower cost. You know, it might not be that typical college experience, but you're still getting challenged academically. And then at the end of those 2 years, where you were paying lower, you'll be able to apply to maybe a more prestigious university than you would have been able to apply to straight off the bat. So the types of institutions are important to think about because it will determine how much you'll be paying at the university. Location also is something that will be a determinant in your cost, like I just said in the previous slide. So location really changes what your cost of living will be. So how much you'll be paying on a day-to-day basis, how much you'll be paying for rent. But also location is important to think about, you know, where you want to be in the United States. So not just thinking about it at a cost point, but also, you know, what you're doing outside the classroom. You know, do you want to be in a mountainous place? Do you want to be in a flat place? Or do you want to be on a coastal side of the United States? Those are quite a few things that you have to think about in regards to location of the university. That's going to change your or your university experience quite greatly. Fit is also something that you'll need to think about when strategizing your application to finance your studies, because you not only have to think about what the university can offer you, but you have to think about, does this match what you can actually offer and afford for a university study? So maybe you can afford a lot, but then the university really can't provide much, and it doesn't quite match, so that fit's not going to match up. Or maybe you can't afford a lot, and then the university also can't provide a lot. Once again, that fit's not going to work. So beyond finances, also fit's very important to think about. So fit is something that admissions staff in the U.S. Will say quite frequently. So it's something that means, when you're choosing a U.S. institution, is it going to like fit your needs, if that makes sense? So what kind of student are you, and what are your needs throughout your 4 years or 2 years studying at the university? And then can the university offer support for what kind of student you are and what you like to do, and what kind of support services you need? So there's a lot of factors that go into fit and how to find the right institution for you. I'm sure there's a ton of webinars on it, but just know that not only the Education USA staff is there to help you find your fit, but also admissions staff will typically be very honest with you about if they think it's a good fit for you and how it could be potentially a good fit for you. Program accreditation versus university name. So those are also some things to think about when strategizing your application. So what's the program accreditation? So universities and colleges across the US all have to be accredited, essentially, or you should be looking at accredited universities and colleges. But also keep in mind that each program within a university is going to be accredited differently, and that is going to essentially make your degree worth more or worth less. So if a university is accredited, that's what you should be looking for, but some programs, specifically engineering or business, will have an additional accreditation that will make your degree worth more when you're applying to jobs. Okay, moving forward. So financing your studies and continuing to strategize your application. So here are some tips that I have for you all when thinking about how to finance your studies. So plan early. This is so important. Think about how you're going to finance your studies, you know, a lot sooner than when you start applying to universities. And how you'll do this is you need to budget appropriately. So you need to ask yourself, how much can you actually afford? And then look from there. And then pick a region, or pick maybe a type of size university. You know, do you want small, medium, or large? Budget first, and then think about what you can afford, and then what the universities can offer you. And when you budget appropriately, you need to think about not only tuition and fees, cost of living, but also take into account increases in tuition and fees, because a lot of times U.S. universities will have increases every year. So you want to make sure you're prepared for that. Meet deadlines. So deadlines are so important. I can't stress that enough. Whether you need maybe a planner to, you know, help organize your life, or a big calendar in your room, deadlines are going to be the most important thing to think about when applying to U.S. universities and applying to scholarships. So just make sure you're on top of everything. And then get to know the admissions staff. I know I've said this quite a few times in the presentation, but it's really important to know who is, you know, doing your application, know who is admitting you, both at the undergraduate and at the graduate level, because they'll be able to assist you best with finding financial aid, finding scholarships. And then the last thing, how will you stand out, and why should you be admitted to the university? Why should you be offered scholarships and financial aid? Really frame that and really do some self-work to think about why you could be a great asset to a U.S. university, and that will help you in the application process, as well as the scholarship and financial aid process. So moving forward and continuing to talk about financing your studies, I will go into talking about sources of funding as well. So what types of funding are available in the United States? There's quite a few different ones, and keep in mind that I also included this list to include the sources of funding you'll find in your home country too, so that together you can potentially help finance your studies easier. So personal or family funds. This is when you should be asking yourself, how much can you afford on a year-to-year or even month-to-month basis to understand what universities you should be looking for. And then talking about fit, U.S. universities and colleges, what can they offer you? So can they offer you what you need, or will you have to find sources of funding elsewhere? So governmental versus private financial aid. So typically international students do not qualify for U.S. government financial aid, something that we call the called FAFSA. If you're a U.S. citizen watching this, you would qualify, and to apply for that, you can either work with the Education USA staff or ask the scholarships or financial aid office at the U.S. university to help you out. Research associations. So research associations, if you are a graduate student in another country, maybe and you're a part of a research association, sometimes they'll be able to help fund you to go to a U.S. university. Same with professional associations. So let's say you are working in another country, you are a part of a professional association, and they'll potentially be able to send you for schooling. Those two kind of go with that last one, so private sponsors. So maybe you have a nonprofit organization or a professional or association that wants to help sponsor your studies in the United States. Those are all ways that you can fund your studies. And then U.S. scholarships. So there's so many different types of U.S. scholarships. It's really important to know what type of funding is available in the United States. So that first one on there is university funding versus external funding. So university funding is funding that comes from the university. So whether that is need-based or merit-based, it's something that you're most likely applying for when you're submitting your application. And then there's sometimes different applications you'll have to submit after that to qualify. External funding, on the other hand, is typically private scholarships or those funds that I talked about in that last slide. So private scholarships or private fellowships that you'll have to apply for. The other types of funding, so university-wide versus department funding. So university-wide funding is what you'll be applying for when you submit your application, and then, or maybe potentially like foundation funding. So that's funding that's coming from money from the alumni, versus department funding. So sometimes departments have, some departments have more to offer students than other departments. Like our College of Arts and Sciences has the most scholarship money dispersed because it's such a large college in comparison to some other colleges on our campus. And each department typically has both funding or scholarships to give out at the undergraduate and graduate level. So when you pick a school, it's important to go through the department's website or the scholarship website and see if there's anything that you can apply for. Need-based versus merit-based. So need-based is essentially based on your need. So not all universities will look at what you need. They'll sometimes only look at merit. And that's important to know. So if you are someone who does require need-based funding, you want to make sure you're applying to universities that provide that. And then merit-based is essentially what it says. So merit, it's based on your merit, your academic background, what your grades were in either your university or high school studies, and universities will provide scholarships on a merit basis. And then athletic scholarships. So athletic scholarships are a bit harder to get, especially depending on the level of athletic rigor at a university. Typically with athletic scholarships, you have to be working, really closely with the coach and the recruiting staff. And they don't typically provide scholarships to what we call walk-ons. So if you come to the university and then you start maybe running track, your chances of getting a scholarship at that point are going to be pretty low in comparison to if you've been working with that track coach since your early high school career, you'll probably be provided with a scholarship. And then on-campus employment. So on-campus employment is a great way for you to finance your U.S. education. International students in the United States can work up to 20 hours per week doing just about any job on campus. So whether that is giving tours of the university like I did, or working at a front desk as a business office assistant, or maybe a research assistant, or a barista in the Starbucks, there's a lot of ways to work on campus that's going to help finance your study. Not only does it help finance your study, but it's also providing really great opportunities for you to gain experience and things to put on your resume so that you're leaving university with real world skills that can go to a job after college. And then graduate specific funding. So graduate specific funding are terms like graduate assistantships and fellowships. So graduate assistantships is something where you're either participating in research or you're teaching, and you're able to not only get your tuition and fees paid for, but you're also able to typically get a stipend to help pay for your cost of living. Graduate assistantships, you can either find them before the application process or after the application process. And with these, it's important to contact the professor, contact the program coordinators to make sure you understand the application process and what they're looking for in a good candidate for a graduate assistantship. At the master's level, you can find graduate assistantships, mostly in the STEM field. And then at the PhD level, you'll want to always be looking for a graduate assistantship. Fellowships are something that is either paid for internally or externally to participate in or to complete research for either like a grant funding or something that the university is funding. And you can either find that through the university, through a professor, or through a private organization. Who is most likely to get aid? I asked that question because it's a great question. You know, are undergraduates more likely, or, you know, bachelor's or PhD students? So mostly PhD students are going to get aid because they're participating in the most research. So there's more opportunities for them to be funded at a university level. That's not saying that masters and bachelors aren't, because both bachelor students and master's students typically qualify for a lot of aid and a lot of scholarships, but it's just sometimes depending on the student and how much work you're putting in or what your needs are. So for example, I did an example about Boise State University. So our undergraduate funding, we have merit-based scholarships. So we don't have any need-based scholarships. We only are looking at a student's merit, and they can be anywhere from $10,000 to $16,000 per year. We have departmental scholarships. So like I was talking about, the College of Arts and Sciences, they can potentially provide a lot of scholarships. Same with our College of Engineering or College of Business and Economics. All of these departments are able to provide scholarships. Our foundation scholarships, so those are scholarships that are run through our alumni association. Or external scholarships. So this is where you can look on the Boise State website and still find scholarships, but they're run through private organizations. Graduate funding, on the other hand, you can find scholarships, again, up to $16,500. Those are going to be a little bit more limited, but they are available. And then we do have quite a few graduate assistantships that are available, and then fellowships that are available as well. We are able to provide a higher level of graduate funding because of our research distinction. So a term that you might hear often is called like the Carnegie classification. And what that means is what level of research is your institution providing or partaking in. So there's R1, R2, and R3. Boise State is R2 currently, and that means that we have a lot of money that's able to go to research funding, essentially. So where can you find more information about scholarships? So I've included some resources right here. Feel free to take some time to write those down. Education USA is a great place to start, and you all are already taking the right step by either going to the center today or attending the session online. StudyUSA.com is a great resource for you. Fulbright, especially for master's and PhD students. And then all of those other, exchange programs, internationalscholarships.com. There's a lot of different funding opportunities that are available, and there's a lot of resources that you have. Probably the most important resource, besides just that list of websites, is truly going to be the admission staff at your university. Feel free to ask them questions, whenever you have them on how to finance your studies at the college that you're thinking about going to, because a lot of times that they will be helpful for you. And then I will now open it up to some questions and answers. And so I'll open up the chat portion. And then I'll also listen for questions from the center as well, okay? Other than that, though, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure presenting to you all. If you have any questions after the presentation that you think of, feel free to email me or give me a call. Liz should have all my information, and my email's just on that page right there. I'm available to answer any questions for you, not only about Boise State, but any questions about U.S. higher ed I'd love to help you with. All right, so I will open it up for questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Celeste. That was a great presentation. While our attendees online are probably typing in their questions into the chat box, I'll open it up for questions in the audience. Is there anybody who'd like to ask a question? Yeah, we have a question over here. So
yes.
Perfect.
Okay, if I already chose a university,
Mhm.
where I need to find information about funding from this university on their website, or maybe I can send an email to this university and ask directly. What is the better way?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can do a few things. So you can take the initiative and look on the website, but if you email their admission staff, or depending, so are you at the graduate or undergraduate level?
Graduate.
Undergraduate, you said?
graduate.
Graduate, okay. So I would email actually the program coordinator of the program that you were admitted to, because they'll have a lot of information for you on the assistantship opportunities within the program. So that's, once again, if you're teaching undergraduates or participating in research, that program coordinator is going to be able to assist you most.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Well, we don't seem to have any more questions in the room over here. And
I don't think we got any chats either.
I guess then I just really want to thank you for the fantastic presentation and the time you took to speak with us today. We really appreciate all the information you've been able to provide us with and sharing your experiences.
Yeah, it was great meeting you all through the screen. Like I said before, if you have any questions about U.S. higher education, feel free to ask me. Beyond the Education USA staff, you can also ask me as well. So I'm looking forward to hopefully meeting you all in the future, or talking to you all in the future. And then thank you, Liz, for putting this together today. I had a great morning.
Thank you very much. Have a great day ahead of you.
Yeah, have a great weekend as well. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.